Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, silly, strange, and sublime aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men, who are the go-to parent, aren't always accepted at work, among their friends, or in the community for what they're doing. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan. Our podcast is just one of the many things we produce each week at the Company of Dads. We have various features, including the Lead Dad of the Week. We have our community, both online and in person. We have a new resource library for all fathers. The one-stop shop for all of this is our newsletter, The Dad. So sign up today at thecompanyofdads.com/The Dad. Today, my guest is Jay Rosenblatt, filmmaker and dad. We're going to talk about his new documentary, How Do You Measure a Year? Each year on his daughter Ella's birthday, from age 2 until 18, he interviewed her and pretty much asked the same questions. What's more remarkable is he didn't look at any of the footage for 17 years. I watched it shortly before this, and it's honestly the best 28 minutes you can spend as a father. And if you have daughters like me, mine are 6, 11, and 14, watch it with them, because I don't want to give much of it away, but there are moments, the sort of ebb and flow of childhood and parenthood, and we've all been there. And the good part, happy ending. It comes out well at the end. Jay, welcome to the Company Dads podcast.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Paul.
As I said, 3 daughters, and I watch your daughter, and I feel like I know her, because I know almost all of those stages. I know up to age 14, and then I don't know the end of the movie, at least personally. But it is so touching, the cute little kid phase, the challenging teen phase, and then comes out the end. But it literally ends when she's 18. So tell us, what are the past, you told me Ella's 22. What are the past 4 years been like? What is she doing now?
She graduated college, so she's in that phase where she's trying to figure out her life. We did stop filming when she was 18 at home because she went off to college. I actually did film age 19 by FaceTime, and I thought I might use that in the film at some point, maybe during the end credits. And it was really sweet, but I decided it felt like the right thing to end at 18, because she left the house to go on her own into the world.
You follow her for 17 years. As I said in the intro, you don't look at the footage until it's all done. But how did you come up with this idea? What was it that you thought, as she was on the cusp of turning 2, that this was going to be something you would do together?
Yeah, well, Paul, I've actually made 4 films before this one with her. And I did, the first one was called I Used to Be a Filmmaker, and it covered her being born up until 14 months old. And it's a very sweet film, and it actually, HBO showed it. It got shortlisted for the Oscars. And I decided to just film her on her birthdays after that film was done. I didn't know if it would turn into a film. I just thought at the very least it would be an archive for her, just showing her different stages, different ages. The other 3 films I made all before she turned 5, and then I just stopped doing that with her. She kind of, it was very clear she was developing a personality, and I felt like I needed to protect her privacy. I didn't want kids coming up to her and saying, "Oh, I saw you on this thing and that thing." Didn't want anything really affecting her life in any kind of adverse way. So I stopped. But the only thing I did continue was filming her on her birthday, which is what this film turned out to be. But like you said, I didn't look at any of the footage the whole time I was filming. Partially because I was using old equipment, and I felt like at certain moments the equipment was cutting out, the sound would cut out, and I thought, oh, I was superstitious, and I just didn't want to look and see that maybe something didn't come out, and then the whole project, wouldn't have been anything that I could turn into a film.
So you use the same old equipment throughout the entire making of
Yeah,
the film?
except for age 18. At age 18, I kind of justified using, I had a new camera probably when she was 13 or 14, but I wanted the film to look the same each year. And I was afraid if I switched to a more modern camera, the format, the aspect ratio would be different, and it would maybe look more higher definition. I just was a little concerned about that. And I kind of gave that up for age 18. I thought, the last year, maybe I could justify having a better image. And it turned out to be a good decision, because when I was editing, I don't know if you remember this in the film, it's kind of subtle, but at one point, she addresses the camera without me in the room.
Yeah.
And the frame opens up, and we kind of experience this. I don't know, I just feel like it has a subtle feeling of her having more say and more agency. And I could only do that because the new camera had a different aspect ratio, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I was able to show a different frame.
Yeah. As a dad, like two things that struck me. Like at one point, it's like it looks like a golden retriever is in there, and then at the end, I've had labs that they only go so long, and then at the end, it looks like a little terrier is in there.
It's the same dog, Paul.
No, it's not.
Just kidding.
Don't
no, it's
like
actually
don't do movie magic on something so sweet and touching. Come on, Jay. All right, this isn't Star Wars. What are we doing here?
Right. It was a chocolate lab, not a golden retriever.
It was fat, man. You had a big fat dog.
It was she had some pounds. We got a second dog while she was still alive, actually, who we still have. Who's getting on with years. Buddy is a terrier mix.
But it looked like, did you have the same like sofa the whole entire time? It looked like, or did that just same color? It looked like almost like it was filmed on like the same spot in your house, your apartment, whatever, for all of those years.
It is the same spot, and it was the same sofa up until I think age 14, maybe 15, actually. And then my wife just said, we got to get a new sofa. And I was trying to hold out because I really wanted to keep everything the same except her.
Yeah.
That's why the framing's kind of the same. The spot is the same. A lot of the questions are the same. But so I had to give in to that. But it does, if you look carefully, the sofa does change when she's a teenager.
Again, I'm not a filmmaker, so I may garble this, but I felt like the style was very spare. We get the questions, we get her answers, and through that alone, you watch her mature from a little girl to a young woman. Were there other options that you thought, or did that all come out in the editing that's how you were going to tell your story with her?
No, I think the concept from the beginning was to keep everything very similar from year to year. I didn't want to go to a different environment, take her outside or anything like that. Some of the other films we did together, were different places. But the basic concept was that she'd be in the same spot, and we would see her really focus on her growing up. Especially most of the film is pretty much a close-up of her.
Yeah.
So we really get to see her face change. And you could almost think it's a different person from year to year. The change is pretty dramatic. And I wanted that to be the focus of the audience, if it turned into a film, which it did.
I mean, there's so many moments. There's one moment when I don't know, maybe she's 3 or 4, and she's annoying the shit out of you because she's playing with the lavalier mic that you buttoned her, and there you are. It's like filmmaker, dad, human, and you're like, just don't touch it. Just don't touch it. And of course you won't, because, you tell a kid not to do something like that. And then of course they only want to do it, more. One of the things that struck me, were the questions, and one in particular, but how, for the listener who hasn't seen the film yet, what were the core questions and how did you come up with them?
Well, since it started when she was 2, most of the initial questions were things that I felt like she could answer, like what's your favorite food? What's your favorite movie? What was the highlight of your year? What was the low point? That kind of thing. There is one question that was kind of beyond her comprehension that I asked early on, which was, what is power?
Yeah, that's a question.
And the reason I asked that, actually, I think this because it has been 20 years since I started this project. But I think I asked that because she was a girl. And I think I felt like, in many ways, girls, need to feel empowered. And I just felt if I broached the notion of power, that would be an interesting thing for her to at first grapple with, and then maybe, I don't know, be able to take on. And she does. I mean, one of the most satisfying answers she gives. At one point, I said, can you use the word power in a sentence? And she says, I'm powerful. And I just loved hearing that. The questions did change as she got older. I added some things like, there's a question I think I added when she was maybe 10 or something. What do you want to say to your older self, to your 25-year-old self? Yeah. That was a question that I felt like even when she was 10, she had to wrap her mind around that. I felt like if she was younger, she wouldn't even know what I was saying. So there were a few that changed as she got older, but for the most part, and some that I dropped, like I stopped asking her what her favorite food was. Those were not as interesting when she get older.
Well, it's also I think at a certain point you also stopped asking, or at least you edited out her response to what is a nightmare. So that would have been pretty fascinating for like an 18-year-old to say this is, because a nightmare could have been a lot more. But I think at one point she says alligators chasing me or something like that when she's quite young.
Yeah, biting you. Yeah. I don't know if I stopped asking the question or just didn't edit or edited it out. I didn't want the film to be just a series of hearing the same answer to the same questions. That would get kind of old and boring. To be honest, I didn't think my questions were great, and I even say that in the film at some point. It's more her answers, but it's also, in a way, I think the most interesting thing about the film is watching time. In 28 minutes, you just see time go by. And I'm sure as a parent, day to day can be very long and slow, but year to year is really fast. It just goes by so fast. They grow up very quickly in a general sense.
So actually for me, like as a father of 3 daughters, what I loved the most was the part of the film that I don't know, because I will always say that I've seen the film to age 14. And so therefore, as they're repeating it, the one who's 11, the one who's 6, I have some sort of sense as to what's coming. And sometimes I'm really happy about what's coming next, and sometimes I'm really sad. And my youngest, who just turned 6, I tell people that age 5, and it's in this film, age 5 is maximum cuteness. Like they're kids, but they love their dads or their moms, and both, and they're self-sufficient, but they're not so self-sufficient that they won't still snuggle in with you. And then, age 11, my daughter just turned 11, and she's the sweetest girl. But I'm afraid that she's about to descend into tweendom, which becomes teenagerness. And so, which I'm full on, teen girl dad right now. And to see, as it really sort of picks up 15, 16, 17, and 18 is heartening. When you went back after all these years and edited the footage into the amazing documentary that you created, how much of it did you remember? And were there any particular things that were a surprise when you watched the footage?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of surprises because I had totally forgotten how she was at different ages. And one of the most surprising things was when she was 18. I say to her that I'd like to go deeper. I'd like to go get a little bit more intimate. And I decided that maybe a way of doing that would be for me to leave the room so she could just talk to the camera on her own and not feel inhibited, maybe, with me being there. So when I started editing the film during COVID, when I got to that age, I had never, I mean, the other ages, I saw everything.
Sure.
So there was some, when I watched it, I remembered it. But this I had never seen. And what she said was very beautiful. And it was like a gift she gave me.
And you had never seen it until that point. You'd never seen it until you edited it out.
No, I had no idea what she said. When I came back into the room, we just kind of continued talking. And then at the end, we hugged each other. But I didn't know what she had said to the camera. I had no idea.
That's one. There's another part early on where she goes from, age 5, and you ask this question, "Oh, I just love you, Daddy. I love you, Dad. Love my dad." And then age 6, and you say like, "What are you most afraid of?" "You, Daddy." And it's why? And you're like, "Why?" And like every parent, has been there, and I can only imagine. And we talked, before you trained as a therapist. You're like, were there moments when you were recording her where you thought like, am I doing something wrong? Am I, missing the boat here? I mean, did you have those moments, in the course of filming this?
Well, I think yeah, absolutely. When I said, "What are you most afraid of?" and she says, "You," I was kind of shocked. And in the film, I do pry a little bit, and I say, "Well, how come?" Like, and she doesn't want to say, and I kind of respected that. I didn't want to push her, but to this day, I wonder what that was about. And I've asked her, since when I finished the film, I said, "Do you remember why you said that?" And she doesn't remember. But yeah, I was taken aback by that.
One thing that's remarkably consistent, once she gets to an age of sort of cognition is, what she wants in life and what she defines in life. And there's a certain beauty to that. I don't want to give it all away, but have you, tell me what it was like when you viewed this film in its entirety for the first time with your daughter, maybe your wife or her mother, maybe was there as well. But what was that feeling like as you viewed it, as a family unit, 20 years after the project began?
Well, it was very satisfying. I had to show it to Ella, not only because I wanted to show it to her, but I wanted to get her consent again, and make sure that she was okay with this possibly going out into the world, and who knows where it would go. And I was just wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be any kind of negative effect. So one thing she assured me was that her social media was private, which I was concerned about because people can get really nasty on social media. And you wouldn't think with a film like this, but I've had other experiences, so I wanted to make sure that she was okay with that. And if there's anything she didn't want in there, I wanted to ask her about that. My wife had this, when I showed it to her, she had similar concerns that I did. She just wanted to make sure it was okay with Ella. That was our main concern. We didn't actually watch the three of us together until we saw it at a screening. We were together. Locally, I had a screening at a theater called the Roxy, and I think that was the first time we were sitting together watching it, and with an audience. So that was very interesting. And Ella came up on stage with me for the Q&A, which was very sweet. But I think it's been like a bonding thing. I think throughout the whole process, one of the things that I think a lot of parents that see it have experienced is, and one of the things that I hope people think about in their own lives is just to check in with your kids, how they're doing and how your relationship is with them. That's one question I asked right from the start, which is, how are we doing? Anything you want to tell me about our relationship? And, as you astutely said, as she gets older, that changes. She talks about us fighting. She's very honest in the film, and she talks about, and sometimes she just rolls her eyes and doesn't want to answer that question.
It's interesting because I would not want to discourage anyone from watching a film because it's magical. It's pure magic. But I think to myself, like, would I have enjoyed it? Would the Paul Sullivan 15 years ago, before I had kids, would I have enjoyed the film? And I don't know, but like, as a parent, it is so deeply moving because there are moments where kids at a certain age catastrophize things, or we use the always and never, and and you're asking about the fighting part, and like, we always fight. And of course, like, if I was not a parent, I'd be like, shit, I'm not having kids, you always fight. But of course that's not true. You for all we don't know this because of the wonderfully beautiful Spare style. You could have just had a knockdown drag up brawl, or she could have just, she had too much cake because it's her birthday, or not enough cake, or whatever. And you've captured this snapshot. But then when it's all stitched together, and again, as a parent who's in the process of doing this 3 times with 3 girls, I see, I get to kind of rewind at times. I never get to fast forward, but I get to rewind. And it's so, wonderful. And when you were editing this to turn it into a story, and not, as you said, just, hear the same 10 questions again and again and again, which would be tedious. How did you think about the narrative of this? And how did you think about, as much of the things that you took out as the things that you left in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't really impose a narrative on it. I think her responses dictated what I left in and what I found interesting. Also, I think the main question with any film like this, which is a personal documentary, is how do you make the personal universal, and how you keep it from being too personal where an audience gets kind of turned off, or so I usually cut things out that only the family would be interested in. References to other people, things like that are things that I think sometimes distance an audience. So since I've done several personal documentaries, I kind of have a sense of what works with a general audience as opposed to just the family itself. So it kind of like, it was a very enjoyable film to edit because I loved, even the outtakes were great. And it went very smoothly, to be honest. Not all the films I did with her were as easy to edit as this one. And maybe part of it is the structure was there. I mean, it was a birthday film each year. So I knew that. And the structure is usually a very hard thing to figure out with documentaries because you're shooting all this footage and you don't know exactly how you put it together. This was very easy structurally. I think the challenge for me was the in and out points of each year. I wanted each in and out point to propel the film forward so the audience is really excited to see the next year. Mm-hmm. yeah, so I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very compelling because as a parent, you sort of relive those moments early on when kids are just so cute and charming, and then it takes you through, the ups and downs of becoming a young adult.
Yeah.
When you talk about, the outtakes, are there any scenes or anything that you edited out that you wished you had kept in, or any that didn't make sense for the film, but you'd like to share that because they were so, funny or resonant or universal?
I actually don't. I haven't looked at the outtakes since I edited it, which was
Yeah.
about 3, 4 years ago. No, yeah, about 2 years ago is when I edited. But no, I don't remember anything, to be honest, that I could share. It was really, it was so clear what was really potent and interesting and funny. And she's a very funny kid. There's, especially when she's young. I mean, I'm sure most kids are, but she is, and she's very thoughtful, and she does. There are through lines like her care for animals is throughout the film, and it's still a big part of her life, and so things like that, I kind of left in because I did want there to be some sort of through line. So that was conscious, I guess, on some level. Um, it's interesting because you have three daughters, and Ella's an only child, and I'm wondering if having sisters will affect the transitions in your daughters, because they kind of see each other, what they're going through. And
They do, but I'll say
yeah,
this, Jay. They are, everything in their lives has been exactly the same. My wife and I have been in similar professions. We moved houses once, but it's we moved like 3 miles away. And I just look at them, and they are hardwired. They've been hardwired from birth to be
right.
who they are, and that's both good and bad. But there's this moment, my kids go to a day camp, and it's wonderful that the bus actually picks them up at the top of our driveway. So for two working parents, that's pretty great. And in the morning, one of us will wait up there with them. And a couple years ago, I did, first day camp, whatever, shooting a video of them, and they're all excited. And I looked at my middle daughter, who is the same age as my oldest daughter, when she just decided that she was too old for camp. She wasn't going to do camp anymore. This is for little kids. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, is this when it's going to happen? Is my middle daughter going to be all done with camp? And of course she's not, because they're just completely different kids. And I look back and we see like the personality traits that they had when they were younger have carried through. And my eldest daughter has said that she wants to be a professor of English literature. That makes perfect sense. My middle daughter has said she wants to be a pediatrician or a kindergarten teacher. Doesn't quite understand the difference in years in college, but it also makes sense because of her aptitude with young kids. And then we joke that the youngest one keeps all of her cards really close to her chest, so we think she's probably going to work for the CIA. But we're not entirely sure. So she would have, my favorite question in your documentary, that what is power? She would have they would all have three very different answers to it. But at the same time, like watching your film, there is a great universality to it because your daughter Ella's personality is there, obviously, but it's like things that she's going through as she matures are things that I don't know what boys do because I don't have any boys, but it's a thing that I've watched my own girls go through, which is why I think it's so gripping, but also ultimately really heartening at the end.
Yeah, and familiar for parents for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of people, even though I agree with you that I think parents in particular resonate with the film, but people without kids have too, because they've been kids and they remember their childhood. And so there is a kind of real universality to what's going on in front of you.
Yeah. Jay Rosenblatt, thank you so much for being my guest on the Company of Dads podcast today. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for listening to the Company of Dads podcast. I also want to thank the people who make this podcast and everything else that we do with the Company of Dads possible. Helder Mira, who is our audio producer. Lindsay Decker, who handles all of our social media. Terry Brennan, who's helping us with the newsletter and audience acquisition. Emily Servin, who is our web maestro. And of course, Evan Roosevelt, who is working side by side with me in many of the things that we do here at the Company of Dads. It's a great team, and we're just trying to bring you the best in fatherhood. Remember, the one-stop shop for everything is our newsletter, The Dad. Sign up at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Thank you again for listening.